Hello, my name is Sean Millerick, and welcome to Marlins After Dark. Why? Because no team keeps you up late at night like the Miami Marlins, especially when they play Tampa. Like, geez, really, whenever they play Tampa. Will they keep you up, as we were just discussing before? I believe 3-23 against the Rays now since 2019. Good times. Joined tonight by Jeremiah Geiger of Marlins 9 and John Rodriguez, just Marlins Twitter fame, to break down the big news of the week. Obviously, that's the Citrus series, right? No, just kidding. We won't dive too much into the Citrus series. We'll get to it at the end, but we want to talk Avi Garcia, the long time now departed Marlin. Big news of the week, and then we'll get into, I think, free agent bust all time for the Marlins and discuss. And I kind of tipped my hand a bit the other day on the Fish on First podcast, where I think he ranks on the list. But we'll talk about the biggest Marlins free agent bust. Let's kick that topic around and see where we all settle in on that list. But guys, how you doing tonight? And I guess we'll jump right to. Did you see this Avisail Garcia news coming?
I'll let you take it, Jeremiah.
Yeah, Sean. It's always a pleasure to be on the podcast and talk some baseball with you. First off, so thank you. And then for the Avisail Garcia news, I think I was so, indoctrinated into the whole belief system that we're going to keep Avi, they're going to eat the money, and it is what it is. It sucks, and I thought that it was just a hindrance. Is just going to continue taking at-bats away from younger guys. So when I saw the news, I was surprised. I was not expecting that, especially for a team that, is all about controlling their assets and controlling their salary as much as they possibly can, even when there's no benefit to the on-field production. But, he was just so terrible, and it doesn't go back to him as a person. I'm sure he was well-liked in the clubhouse. I know Noah Berger talked about that. He was a big clubhouse guy. Although you can read stories about his time in Detroit with Prince Fielder, and you can that's otherwise. But that's just me.
He might have learned some lessons from that time, maybe.
So it was time. He had to go. I mean, what was he hitting 108? I think in his rehab assignment. Like, the dude was absolutely helpless at the plate. So long.
Yeah.
Right, no, John, you can jump in.
Same, Sean. No, thanks for having me. It's been a while. Pretty much the same thing that Jeremiah said. I was not expecting the Marlins to just DFA him. I think we were going to ride the Avi Garcia contract. Kind of similar. I think his fate was very similar to the way Wei-Yin Chen's ended here in Miami. So, I was there for one of the rehab starts in Jacksonville where Avi Garcia actually hit a triple and ran for his life over the third. Other than that, man,
how fast is Avisail Garcia running for his life?
Not so fast, but I mean, there was a couple blue plays there by the outfielders, and the throw over to third was a little weak. But other than that, not a good signing, man. Like, maybe originally I was a little excited. It's good to see the Marlins spend some money, but I think the lesson we learned as well as fans is, you can't just throw money at anyone. You got to really take a deeper dive into who exactly you're signing, and the specifics, like ballpark factors, like maybe Avi Garcia, even though he has one of the longest hit home runs in Lone Depot Park history.
True.
It didn't pan out, and now things don't always work out. But Avi Garcia's just total disaster from top to bottom. I mean, if you remember Kim Ng and Derek Jeter talking about Avi Garcia and the signing, talking about his personality, his attitude, his work ethic, and I think that one stood out because when you saw Avi Garcia play in a Marlins uniform, the jogs over to first base kind of gave you questions about how much it really meant for him to stay in that big league level, especially getting that haul of money that was a part of his salary. So in general, it's relieving to see the Marlins make some moves. And yeah, as we just saw,
My cat.
Jeremiah pretty much.
Cat can't contain himself. Needs to get it.
The cat is just as excited as we are to see Avi Garcia
Right.
gone.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see it coming either. Yeah, as far as that some of that hustle. Derek, we heard Derek Jeter wanted to look him in the eye when that deal was signed. I'm guessing he had something in his eye when I got a little distracted when that happened. We kind of had the Mishbomb drop on the Marlins Spaces this weekend when he was, questions were firing, and there was a comment made about Avisail Garcia just being there. And my question, if I got one in, was going to be about basically the opposite of what played out in the last few days. It was going to be, is it just stubborn pride that we're going to run this into the ground of Avisail Garcia? But then we found out that maybe to cool our jets and see what happens. And then sure enough, they did actually, eat the money, not just keep it there, hoping against hope, for something the whole time. And I did not see that coming. I guess, I think it probably just became untenable to tell, younger kids on this team that their performance matters. And, the young players, the players who are going to be here in 2027 and 2028 that are still, watching this. And if they were to put out someone who had that AAA, rehab staff line, I think about 2 hits and, and about 20 at bats, you said it with the 108 average, you can't bump someone from the roster who's been at all contributive, for that, and be serious and say that anything you do here, matters. And of course, that's one of the bigger storylines of the season is that, well, a lot of what this team is doing right now doesn't matter in 2024, but going forward, putting in the work, showing that work pays off and gets the rewards that it does, both in terms of playing time and future earnings, then you can't put that player out there. I did want to ask you guys if that rehab assignment had gone a little better, if against AAA competition, obviously night and day against the big leagues, but if Avi was hitting 270 with a couple home runs over the last 15 games at AAA, did this day of deliverance come this week, or is he back on the roster and Dane Myers is begrudgingly packing his bags this week?
Man, that's an interesting one. I mean, if he was hitting 270, would the Marlins really factor out that sample and say, hey, maybe we should give him another shot, despite the many other chances he's already had with the team throughout the course of the years that he's been here in a Marlins uniform? I mean, given the conversations with Mish, even though it was within his span, it being in the rehab starts, I don't know. I mean, considering it's the Marlins, I think he would still be in a uniform, and I'm just gonna give him the benefit of the doubt that they would have kept Avi in the team, especially with that big money, big contract that they had to eat up.
For me, I would say this would be just a pure guess on my part, but if he really showed up in the rehab assignment, I think the optics wouldn't look that good DFAing him. Because it's why didn't you DFA him 3 months ago?
Right? Yeah.
So okay. I would think he would get a couple more games, couple at bats, and naturally he would go 0 for 4 with a couple strikeouts and a double play, and then they DFA him. I think he would have seen at least a couple more games on the major league field. But that's what I would have done. Or
that's fair.
Not done, but seen it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that just, I gave the 270 line. If it had just been that just enough, I'd like to think that maybe based on just, again, the message sent by just accepting forever the fact that you're paying this, 24 million, left out of the deal, that's certainly not nothing to the Marlins organization. Tough pill to swallow, something they've been avoiding swallowing for over a season now at this point. So I'd like to think that maybe that they still, would have done this, that it would have taken some, otherworldly, tear that still would be against, minor league competition, but that, him hitting 400 on the assignment and going on some, ridiculous minor league ballpark aided power binge to, avoid that. But in any case, that's not what happened. And, we arrived at the position, that we did, and which brings us to probably considering just all time Marlins, free agent bust is our, big ticket event of the evening. to me, and I wrote about this for Call to the Pen a couple of days ago. It's a pretty unchallenged holy trinity, unholy trinity, I guess would be the better way to say it for Marlins bust for Avisail Garcia, Wei-Yin Chen, who Job mentioned earlier in the pod, 5 years, $80 million signing, and then Heath Bell, just for his prominence of the position. I think he's still pretty strongly in third for me. Where do you guys kind of agree with that ranking of maybe the three worst, and who do you have in the number one spot?
I'll let you. You want me to take it?
Yeah, you say I'll go after.
So, Sean, I know that the big three, like the Mount Rushmore of Marlins terrible signings, is Avi, Chen, Bell, as you listed right there. But there's others, man. Like Tazawa.
We're gonna get to fourth. Once we talk about these guys, I want to flesh out who makes up the rest of the top five, because it's that I think is an interesting debate, and I have him on my short list. Let's come back to him.
There's others too, like you got Mike Morse, Jared Saltalamacchia.
Morse.
Man, that salty signing, man. And Rafael Furcal. I mean, I don't think it was more so the pay for Rafi Furcal. I think they were looking for a veteran piece, right? In 2014, that was the year where the Marlins were starting to say, hey, we spent that 62-100 season in 2013. Let's build it up. And, that's when they signed Garrett Jones and they brought in Casey McGee. But, Rafi Furcal played what? Like, he had less than 40 plate appearances with the Marlins. So, I mean, you could probably throw that one in there. Could you throw in Jose Reyes? I mean, he was impactful for the time that he was here, but his tenure ended way short. But you have to also consider it was a 6-year deal. Like that was a huge deal right there that we threw on Jose.
I think that's still the record, right? That's the biggest contract, the biggest free agent contract.
I believe so. Yeah, I feel like it was the biggest splash signing that the Marlins have pretty much ever done. But now, if I was to give you my top 5 in this specific order,
three right now.
Oh, 3? Well, I'll give you
3. No, then we'll get to 5. I want to do it in 2 parts.
I'd got to go Avi number 1. I mean, the Marlins were put in a position where they had the chance to splash and go up from there. Number 2, it's got to be Wei-Yin Chen. I mean, horrific signing. It was a 5-year, $80 million deal. He had like almost 300 innings pitched and just a total disaster from the Marlins. And number 3, man, I'm torn between Heath Bell and Saltalamacchia, because Saltalamacchia was a 3-year, $21 million deal. So,
and very useless. Yes.
Very useless, very, very useless. And I'm talking about offense, defense. His pickoff attempts were horrid. Like, man, but see, Heath Bell, the Marlins would have been a way better team and probably would have not fire sailed, everything that led off in that 2012 season, which, by the way, we were all hyped. Like, let's be honest, you got to be lying if you weren't hyped about that Marlins team. So I got to give it a Bell.
I worked at a grocery store in South Carolina, and I still bought a season ticket package.
Dang, wow!
Just to get tickets for opening day. That's how hyped I was about that team.
And reasonably so. Brand new ballpark. The Marlins threw money at players. We were getting past World Series champions, respectable names like Carlos Zambrano, Mark Burley. But man, Heath Bell really, really, really depleted what the Marlins were building. We had games where we were literally 3 outs away, maybe an out away from winning the game, and we were under 500 by what was it, June? And then the whole Guillen stuff started happening. So I got to give it a Bell.
Crazy-ass manager did not help that team, but that team had ended up having 101 problems, but certainly with your point with the direction of the fire sale, and that's part of the calculus for me. And maybe we should have led with that, is what do you factor into a bust? With the Marlins, money is a big part of it, because Marlins. But it's also like, what did these bad moves, cost you? Like, we'll get to, the back of the list. Like you mentioned for a call earlier, and I engaged with some people on Twitter, over the last couple of days. I think I heard Furcal mention a couple of times there as well. But then that was, like, that team sucked, and like,
Right.
what did it really cost us? In the end, that
And they honestly finished better than I remember. Didn't they finish like 77 and 85? That 2014
Oh no,
Marlins team?
but I think Furcal was on the 13 team.
Oh yeah.
So no, they were just horrible. No, the 14 team was great.
Yeah, I remember that 14 season fun, but that's besides the point. But you know what, John? I'm gonna switch minds up. I'm gonna say Chen 1, Avi 2. I feel like the Chen signing. You got to remember the implications of that Chen signing was, we were looking for that big piece that we were gonna replace Jose with. Remember, Jose had passed away, or was Chen in the team with Jose?
No, Chen was on the team with Jose.
Oh, okay.
Chen was going to be the
Edison
number 2
Volquez.
behind Jose.
Right. It was Volquez that came in the next season. Right. No, but Chen, regardless of the matter, I think he was. At first, I was a little excited, sort of, because Chen had a respectable track record in Baltimore in a, by the way, hitters friendly ballpark in Camden Yards at the time, at least, with the walls. But yeah, I'd have to say Chen. I mean, $80 million for Chen is insane for what he turned out to be. Like Matt Lato's horrible. That's what it was.
Yes. Well, Jeremiah, what about for you? What's your ranking? Then we can break this down a little more.
First off, you kind of have to separate the two categories, I think, when you have Avi and then Chen and Heath Bell, because Chen and Bell were both Loria guys. Jeffrey Loria, who, in all fairness, I know a lot of people in South Florida hate Jeffrey Loria and is a very polarizing figure. He would spend money, whether it was the right guy, that's debatable. But if Chen goes out and finishes top 5 in Cy Young voting every year, we're talking as one of the greatest signings ever, based on the $80 million. This Avi signing was the biggest splash that Bruce Sherman has made, by far, and it will never happen again. As far as this model, predicts with the Rays and the developing players trading them away, to issue out 4 years, $53 million, it stands out like a sore thumb among Marlins fans because you look at the last 6-7 years, that's the biggest splash you made, and it produced just an albatross of a contract and an absolute stain in the lineup every single night.
Yep.
So for me, at that point, it's Avi. Avi's the worst because not only of you have the ownership group that refuses to spend, and this is their one marquee signing, and you strike out on it. But number two, you have to remember the time that we're talking this signing. The whole thing is we have money, we're going to spend it. We've got to reinvest into the team. The infamous Sherman quote. And they do. They spend money on Soler. They spend money on Garcia. You look at last year, Soler earned his contract. Whether you want to say, he was streaky or not, he propelled this team into the playoffs, him and Arias. And then when they got Bell and Berger, Avi had nothing to do with it. He was sitting on the sideline, his hamstring, eating a bag of chips. So for me, it's Avi Garcia. Number two, I would say Chen. I got to go with Chen because of the sheer money and the fact that he's a starter. I mean, $80 million for a starter over, I think it was 5 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. And he was just so bad. And you looked at the time, you're like, oh, Jose Fernandez, number 1. Number 2, you have Wei-Yin Chen, who was really good in Baltimore. And I was like, okay, the Marlins are finally getting a pitching staff to go with the Stanton and Ozuna and Yelich.
And the Yelich, yeah.
And it was nothing. Absolutely nothing. So for me, that's number 2. And the only reason I put him ahead of Heath Bell is just because I think of the impact a productive Chen would have had.
Right.
The Marlins were already flawed in 2013 or 2012 with the whole, Heath Bell, he blew a lot of games, but you still had guys underperforming like Burley. You still had Jose Reyes, who was dealt a year after that. That team was flawed from the beginning. So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I knew with Bell in third. I'd say for me, it's the order that lays out here. Avi, Chen, Bell. Bell's kind of distantly in third because the Marlins. So if we weigh in the money part of it, then realize that almost sounds like a putt on weigh in. If we put in the money part, then the Marlins were able to move most of Bell's salary. I think they unloaded about $21 million of his contract onto Arizona. The next year, and they traded him. So like that, that anchor was off of their neck, but he did definitely start the snowball rolling on what became, another mini sell-off, of that team, led to that team just starting nosediving, that 2012 team we're all excited about. So in third for that. Chen, I would have been until this season, until this offseason, until Kim Ng was fired, I would have been banging the table for Chen to easily be number one. Because you think about what, that 80 million, and what that came out to per season, just what else that money, even some of that money, could have been spent on good teams. So this isn't like, mentioning Rafael for Carl again. The 2013 Marlins would have sucked either way and been one of the worst teams that we've watched play baseball, no matter what happened, in relation to him. But the 2016 Marlins, the 2017 Marlins, that some of that money had been spent on almost any other free agent pitcher, that was on the market, that year, or even if they just called someone up. Probably if they just didn't have that spot in the lineup, do one of those teams, maybe both of those teams, finish with a 500 record, and then is the Marlins franchise in the position they are right now, like overall, factoring in public perception and roster depth and everything, if they had 2 winning seasons in a row, before that happened. I don't know. It's a pretty good what if, and Chen is responsible for that, and that money ran through 2020. So, that's just money that could have been spent at any point to make many, teams better, including a playoff team, if we count the 2020 team, as one. But there, and they just got so screwed with that. Like, they paid every penny of Chen's contract, because if you remember, they finally did do the Avi thing with him going into the 2020 season. Like, you know what? We can't send this message to our young pitchers that we're going to keep running this guy out there. And then the way MLB handled the COVID settlements for salaries, it turned out that if the Marlins had just decided Chen would be on the team, they would have saved millions of dollars. Instead, since they cut him before everything happened, that season, they had to pay him every penny of what he was scheduled to make before things went sideways globally there. But Avisail Garcia, he started this fire sale. So it clearly broke Bruce Sherman's spirit, and
that's a good point.
That just puts him into first for me. Is he caused this? Jeremiah called it. We're not spending again on a free agent anytime soon, because this was his big foray into doing so, and it shattered him. It's clear that Bruce is not doing that anytime soon. It's why we've adopted the Rays way, and maybe that'll work out in every way it's supposed to, but it's going to severely kind of cripple this approach. Like, we've seen it play out on here, right? Fans aren't happy about this approach. There's a lot of angst, a lot of dubiousness with it, and because he caused that to happen, and everything that's happened this season, in a negative sense, all that ill will, even though they ate Arias' salary, there was never an Avi on the books, we can even play, are we unloading Arias, this quickly? Would they have spent more money this offseason, enough to make this team, a little bit better? Maybe. That's all, fair questions, to ask, and that puts Avi in front for me. So John, you alluded to this though. So what do you think would round out the top 5 on there? So that is our top 3, and we all seem to kind of agree with that for the most part. Who is 4 and 5 on the list? Because the thing with the Marlins is they don't spend that much money often, right? So we don't have any other $56 million, $80 million contracts to fret about. This is all much lower level stuff at this point. But what else makes the list?
So based on the general consensus, it would be Avi, Chen, Bell as the top 3, and to wrap up that Mount Rushmore, you'd have. I'm torn between Saltalamacchia and Tazawa, because
Okay.
in modern day, at least in today's day, spending 12 million on a reliever that like Tazawa is a bit of an overpay, because typically relievers are getting what, like $4 to $9 million, maybe even 10 if they're like big name, if anything.
Very big name.
Yeah. So spending $12 million for Junichi Tazawa, who pitched,
He was horrible.
I believe it was like 70 innings with the Marlins and had an ERA of like 7 in his entire tenure, which is atrocious. But then again, you have to consider catcher versus reliever. Who do you value more? I gotta say catcher, because the catcher is calling the game. Satalamaki was horrible at literally everything he did in the Marlins. So I gotta go Avi, Chen, Bell, Salty, Tazawa. That's my top 5.
So
Jeremiah.
So
I'm going to push back a bit on Salty in a minute, but I want to hear you go first.
the thing with Salty, right? Like Tazawa, first off, was just terrible, but they did end up DFA. I remember.
Yeah.
I actually remember the day they DFA'd him. Like it's just like walking into like Wednesday night church, and it's like, oh, Tazawa was DFA. Like,
Like a national holiday.
It's like
This
that's
works.
Like
They give it a design.
the thing with Salty, right, is that team. If you put him on the 2014 team, and you add that production from catcher, that 2014 team could have made the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, they weren't a bad team. This was a good team. They were sitting 3-4 games over 500 at the deadline. They make the moves for Jared Cosart. They got Kike Hernandez back in the deal.
Yeah.
It was an interesting team. That was a really fun team. So if Salty performs that year, maybe
Would have made it.
They would have made it. They would have pushed better for a wild card. So I think Salty's at 4 just because of the situation they were in and the team, like the impact he could have made, and he didn't. And then at number 5, that was a good one. I'm going to throw in another name in there, Michael Morse coming off. That was the next window the Marlins had, was like, okay, so it wasn't enough in 2014. Let's spend a little more. Here we go. Here's some bats in 2015. We'll run it back. On paper, that team was better than 2014, and Morse was complete garbage.
Garbage, yeah. He was
From the get-go. Like, the entire beginning, the first couple weeks, it was like, oh, what have we gotten ourselves into? And it was sad because, like, I was like, oh, Michael Morse, San Francisco, big power bat. It's like, here we go.
It was a huge World Series piece, too.
Yeah,
led them to that.
Off the World Series and nothing. It's like, so Michael Morse for me slides in there at 5.
Okay.
All right, solid. My one quibble with Salty on there, and it's and I definitely think he's at 6 at worst, I guess at best. But we'll flip it, however it would be phrased for this for this list. Because the 2014 point is fair. That just a little bit more production from a spot they're really counting on him from that season. Then that's another team that could have just they definitely overachieved based on how the 2015 season played out, even after adding as much to it as they did. But that could have been another case where could have been one more winning season, perhaps in South Florida. And then what does that do to big perception with the franchise? But the reason I left him off of my top 5 was that, again, if you think of just how much damage overall for the length of the contract, and they got away from that pretty quickly, and they had this other catching prospect they were quite excited about. Then JT Realmuto ended up just Wally pipping him about like a month into 2015. Like, I think Mike Redmond was still the manager when they decided they were just going to start Realmuto instead of Salty, and just again ate that contract and just moved on in that sense. So I feel like that's kind of almost makes it a push, is that since they had just another good option, and then made the right choice going forward and set up those next couple of teams for success. But Tazawa, that I have 4. That's again a 2017 team that could I think maybe like $7 million he earned that season, that had been spent in any other way, any number of areas. That's a team that again, finishes, over 500, maybe a little more of a push, to make the postseason. So I've got to hang that on Chizawa. I had Morse fifth, but I changed my mind like just kind of before coming on. I was in thought of a couple of recent left side of the infielders, for the Marlins, that if it's not actually worth putting either a Tim Anderson or Gene Segura on this list. And ultimately I arrived at Segura. Just kind of bonus points to whatever extent Avisail Garcia didn't break Bruce Sherman's spirit on free agent signing. I think Gene Segura probably just about finished it off. And again, if we just go by money, even though they were able to move a lot of it, last season, it's still just, if that had been another player obtained that was more successful from the jump, does that help this 2023 team out a little bit more? But mostly for just being horrible last season when he was on the field, and then just serving as just another example, seemingly, to Bruce Sherman that free agency doesn't work and we need to do this.
I wanted to touch
different approach. So he'd be my fifth.
I want to touch really quickly on Sal Talamaki before we move on. I like how you mentioned that the Marlins had alternatives in place for a replacement for Sal Talamaki. Remember, we toyed with Real Muto, we toyed with Tomas Talis, which, by the way, that's another awful one. But I learned to appreciate someone like Jeff Mathis. Jeff Mathis, a guy who did not have a bat to save his life, could even hit a watermelon if you threw one at him. But
I saw him hit a grand slam once.
I saw him hit a grand slam too. Like that man.
No, he did not.
He was like Jose Fernandez's personal pitcher. That dude knew how to call a game. He knew how to work with young guys. He developed them into, they gave them good outings. Tom Kohler would go out there and allow 4 runs a game, but every time he pitched with Jeff Mathis, he was going the distance. He was pitching 7-8 innings a game, regardless of how many runs he gave up. But Mathis was a workhorse, and I learned to appreciate a catcher like Mathis. So I just wanted to touch on that because it really depends now if fans value, what came after, right? Like that's another thing to account. Like what did the Marlins do to address said player? We can't really figure one out yet for Avi because it's, it literally just happened. But for Sal Talamaki, we got Real Muto. Real Muto is what? Top 5 catcher in baseball, if not one. Like you got to also kind of think about, what did we address? What did we do? What did we change? So for Salty, maybe you could even push him down a little bit on the list, considering that we had options in place for him. So for anyone doing a list,
good point.
For anybody watching,
what I think is interesting too, John and Sean, and I just thought of this just the last 5 minutes or so, is if you took Sal Talamaki and you say, okay, 2014, 2015, let's say that contract works out. Like, let's say he was an above average defender, but above average hitter, and they got what they paid for, right? They got what they were expecting. You could see, theoretically, the Marlins having traded Real Muto and used him as a huge trade piece and got a big, big name, because he was a nice prospect. So it's like the butterfly effect, I guess, is who knows,
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's one, thing where when I thought about maybe including Salty, that was the biggest thing, I looked at, because I think a story came out like a year ago. There was a rumor that I think Rosenthal reported it, that there was a chance that maybe the Marlins could have gotten Jake Arrieta from the Cubs, but that the Cubs were asking for Real Muto. And I don't know, I almost implied that was the deal breaker, and the Marlins said no, which might have been I don't know that was the right decision or not. But then when Jake Arrieta, that was before he really took off for a few years there. So if you had
no hitters and
Cy Young caliber form, Jake Arrieta and Jose Fernandez stacked together, push one of those teams into the playoffs, maybe. So yeah, if Salty had been worth the money, then then maybe that does work out, and then we don't have the Sixto Sanchez experience a few years later.
Really good point. Yeah. So honestly, if I were to change the list, I think Salty goes down to 5. And like you said, Sean, at worst, because we're talking about the worst here, you said 6. So he's interchangeable between 5 and 6, I think.
Yeah, that's fluttering.
Yeah, I think it would be right there. He's definitely in that little branch, but he's definitely like a big name that we should account for, and I think he's gonna be like engraved in our heads for seasons to come because.
Well, for no other reason than we all had to learn how to spell that name, right?
Right. Right.
Friday. Still do it. Him and Roethlisberger. That's just like my heart.
Honorable
challenging
mention,
intellectual feats. Of the
Brad
last.
Ziegler.
Which one?
Brad Ziegler.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, with Brad, he brought a different element to the game because he had the different type of pitching style.
Yeah,
and I think that's what brought him a different kind of. But he was also getting old, So, what do we pay for Ziegler?
It was like a 2-year 12, I think. 2 and 12.
I think he made I was looking at it. I think he made a couple million less than Tozawa, and he had a ERA. It was like a point better or something. So
it was still like a multi-year
him off.
Wow, was he really that bad?
It was like 2 years, I think 12 mil. I might be wrong, but it was definitely 2 years.
Yeah, definitely 2 years. I remember that. Yeah. That was what, 2016,
it was part of the
17?
Super Bowl then. Remember? That was the plan.
Yep. The Super Bowl pen. Oh man, that's a name. That's a name for sure.
No. Oh, fun times. Well, I was going to touch on a trade topic, but I think we may actually save that for another show. As I'm sure that'll come up again over the course of the summer. So I guess quickly we'll just talk. We can talk Citrus Series really quick. Just wrap. Marlins getting swept by the Rays. Did anything? And then we'll touch on just some baseball travel we all have either recently done or about to do at the end before we call it. Did anything jump out to you in this 2 games that you think will have an impact going forward, other than the departure of Avisail Garcia? Anything you can learn from this series, other than that we're miles away from realizing the Rays' way, I guess? Or
maybe the fact that Josh Bell has gotten the back rolling, so hey, Peter Bendix. Wanna
trade him now.
Trade him now. That's all I gotta really say. I mean, it's one of those series where, it happens and we just historically suck against the Rays. I'm actually trying to look for the all-time record against the Rays. It's not good.
There was a while where we were killing them, I think, just when they were obviously getting their feet under them in the 90s, but for a very long time, yes, it's been very one-sided.
For me,
really bad.
It's got to be. So this kind of ties in part to the overall organization structure of the Marlins. You had Jesus Luzardo go out and just get absolutely shellacked, just 9 runs, and it's like, okay, that's fine. It happens. I've seen it happen to Sandy. I've seen it happen to the best of them. It's going to happen. But then Mish is tweeting out the same night how the Orioles had a trade in place for Joey Ortiz going back to Miami, and the Marlins dealing Luzardo. That was kind of like the player that was rumored to be the guy in the trade. And you look at ultimately the Orioles trade Joey Ortiz to the Brewers for Corbin Burns, who is miles ahead of Jesus Luzardo as a pitcher. And that kind of shows you where the pitching market is. And this infuriates me because you say, okay, one eye on the present, one eye on the future. There you have it. You got Joey Ortiz, who's tearing it up, by the way, in Milwaukee. You want to look at the analytics. Sprint speed is elite. Bat speed is elite. I mean, he's tearing it up in Milwaukee. Is ready to go, major league ready prospect. You could have plugged and played him right now. And you get cold feet for why? When Luzardo's trade value was the highest it could possibly be in the winter. If you were going to retool, rebuild, then make that trade. I wouldn't even have had a problem with it because of the fact he was major league ready, And the fact that you don't, and now he gives up 9 runs to the Tampa Bay Rays, and his velocity is a little bit down, and now you're like, okay, he's already had an injury earlier this season. His value's not going to go any higher. So each time he steps on the mound, it's a risk you take. And that, I think, was my takeaway is you're going to see guys give up big, runs and outings like these. But it takes me back like, man, I would have taken that deal.
I think I'd push back a little on it just because I think, some of that is, hindsight. Like, I don't think, any team I think there were 30 teams in baseball that didn't know that Joey Ortiz is going to become that quickly. What he did, like right now, like today, with hindsight, yes, absolutely. I would rather have Joey Ortiz than Jesus Luzardo. As much as that pains me to say, even though it's still kind of a short sample size, he could. But at the time of the deal, I think that the Marlins are probably right to look at a little bit more, because the way the market seems to work with these kind of trades is that it's so little of it is almost about the talent in this immediate season, but it's about that remaining control. And Burns is going to be a free agent going into next offseason. He'll make tons of money somewhere, and maybe the new Orioles owner decides to shell it out, but he's probably going to be a Dodger or something. And the Marlins, but with Luzardo having all that remaining control, makes him a little more of an attractive piece. His Luzardo's ERA is obviously not great this season, but I think there's still a lot going right under the hood to make him interesting and worth a good return. And I could see the Marlins thinking that. At least the only thing that gives me pause in saying that they would expect top 100 prospects for him, like but much higher ranked prospects than Ortiz was for the Orioles, is that comment that Craig Mish just made on the Spaces this weekend, that he does expect it to keep being those 18, 19-year-old pieces, so that if the Marlins are looking to do another package like they got for Arias, for Luzardo, but with a couple more upside names in there, but still, A-level kids.
And that's the problem I have.
But I hope they don't do that. Like, I want this trade to happen. I want it to be a trade just as impactful as the Ortiz one. A better version of the Gale Chisholm trade would be fine with me. Not very much shade in a certain direction, but I would like an immediate MLB starter that I could feel good about watching for at least 4 seasons. I'm contributing to the Marlins roster in exchange for him, rather than the boatload of A guys. But hopefully he comes back and the velocities back up, and it's just a blip. Pitchers have crap starts all the time. These last couple of years, it's just the pitching environment. But I guess the big one for me was take away from this is I think you may have hit it with Bell. Honestly, that's Tampa owns us, and I think they'd have to eat every penny of that contract to move him. We're not getting much, but if he's does this for another month, then maybe that is possible, and that's just one more prospect that the Marlins could obtain.
At this point, you just make it a season where you just eat up contracts.
That'll be that's, and then no one be surprised when Bruce never spends again for the next 2 or 3 years after it. But
he goes into money exile. I feel like that's just the move. I feel like once you did it with Arias, you already did it with Avi, which is the big one, right? Like, that's a lot of money right there. So, if you're going to move Bell, hey, might as well just eat up all the money you're going to do, all in one season, and move on, turn the page, and get the ball rolling next time around. It's baseball. Things come and go, and, you got to accept your losses and move on.
Yeah. And moving on, so we're closing some baseball travel. I've got a couple stadiums ahead of me in a week. I'll be checking out the Marlins in DC, and then I'm just watching the Orioles play the Phillies, I think. But checking off 2 more stadiums. So doing my own Beltway series tour, I guess. But John, you said you were just down on the farm, so since that's really all that matters for the Marlins right now, any impressions?
That is correct. Yeah, I visited 2 minor league stadiums of 2 Marlins minor league affiliates. One of them I was accompanied by Fish on First writer Kevin Barra. I was over at Jupiter to watch the Hammerheads against the Tampa Tarpons. And we watched this young gentleman right here, right behind me, Noble Meyer. Man, is he electric. He's a beast. I mean, coming in there, really, really, really humble gentleman. I mean, the way he spoke about his game, accepted his mistakes, watched him throw his career high. I think it was 11 strikeouts that game. That was really, really impressive. Now he's in Beloit, and I think he's still killing it over there in Beloit. So it's really, really nice to see Marlins down in the farm showing it off and shoving, especially as pitchers. So maybe the Marlins still have a pitcher. What's the word?
Pitching factory.
Pitching. Yeah, there you go.
It's what they do.
And secondly, yes, I was in Jacksonville. I saw the Jumbo Shrimp against the Durham Bulls. Shrimp did lose that game, but they put up a fight. It was a fun stadium. I will say I liked Jacksonville Stadium. The atmosphere is feels very major league. It's very nice. Saw Avi Garcia hit a random triple. That was amazing. So I guess I was there to watch Avi Garcia's last.
You may have seen a
last
bit of
game.
history with that one, yes.
Yeah.
Made a sliding catch as well by the bullpen. And besides that, my next stadium that I'm looking to go to is the Trop. I'm looking to be there July 31st against the Marlins. So
Okay.
we know the splits.
Well, they're going to lose, but
we know the splits, but I'll be there. It's going to be I have an app that tells me that'll be my 10th MLB and baseball related stadium I've attended. So exciting.
Very nice. I should be at I think this will put me at 25 at the end of this 26. I think this will put me at 26.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, it's whittling down the list.
Gotta weed them out.
So excited for that, but yeah, I'll be catch a little bit of the Marlins on the Friday game, and then I'll be there with the kids for Father's Day on there. So maybe
cool.
have them run the bases, meet some nationals on there. Looking forward to that. But then for the Friday game, I think I'll just go and slowly tour the stadium without having to buy any ice cream.
Start collecting the caps.
Yeah, and then the Orioles, I'll have fun watching the Orioles and the Phillies. And I've always wanted to see Camden Yards. That's probably one of those stadiums that planted the idea that touring baseball stadiums could be fun. It's supposed to be one of the classics. I'm definitely excited about that as well, even if the Marlins aren't going to be present.
I haven't been able to catch a major league game this year. I want to. Maybe one in Atlanta. I'd like to go see a Marlins Braves game early August. It's not too far from me, about 6 hours. I saw the stadium. I've been in there. I saw a Morgan Wallen concert there.
Okay.
So it's a nice stadium, but haven't seen a game there. But I'd love to see a game there.
Yeah,
and then
I've never seen one at the new Braves Park.
Yeah. And then minor league, it's funny, John. You mentioned that Durham's about an hour 20 minutes from me, so I went there a couple of weeks ago. It's a beautiful skyline there. So I actually want to go again. Hopefully this weekend, me and my fiance drive up and see a game.
Okay.
I want them to play Jacksonville. But every time I look, they're playing in Jacksonville, not home in Jacksonville. So I'm like, dang, because I'd be cheering for Jacksonville. Everyone's like,
of course.
But other than that, Fayetteville Woodpeckers. That's where I'm stationed at, and it's a Class A team for the Houston Astros.
Okay.
So it's fun, You go in, and I love just any baseball stadium, any baseball experience. It's beautiful. It's awesome. That's what summertime's all about.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
I love it, guys. Well, hey, thanks for jumping on. Talking bust down a busted series. But got to close on a happy note there. Go catch some summer baseball, folks.
Absolutely,
and maybe watch other teams too, just to mix it up and keep it light. But for Marlins After Dark tonight, I'm Sean, Jeremiah, John, and we'll catch you next time. Go.
And if you're tired of the Marlins, go Panthers.
Hey, there you go. Starts this weekend.
That's right.